We're in volume we're in volume 5 of the Bible story. And on my book, which is 70 something years old, on the front we have a mom and a child waving at their father on a cart. I mean a chariot leaving. Okay? And we are in, if you've been following, we are in part 4. Excuse me. Story 10, Escape from a Dungeon. Okay, so that's what this says. It says, as Jeremiah continued to warn people of the coming judgment, it was not long before he got in trouble. After one sermon in which he had said that Jerusalem would become desolate without inhabitation if it did not return to God, he was arrested and brought before the prince of the city. This man is worthy to die, said his accusers, for he hath prophesied against the city, and ye have heard with your ears. With your ears. So he said that. So angrily were some of the priests and prince that they would have killed him there and then if a few strong friends had not spoken up for him. As it was, another prophet, Uriah, 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 who had been given exactly the same message, was put to death. Another time, when Jeremiah was preaching, Pulcher, the high priest and chief officer of the temple, beat him and put him in the stocks, where he was left all night. The next morning, when he was set free, Jeremiah told Pulcher that was going to happen to him. What was going to happen to him? Thus saith the Lord, he said, I will give all Judah into the hands of the king of Babylon, and he shall carry them captives to Babylon, and shall slay them with the sword. And thou, Pulcher, Pulcher, and all that dwell in thy house will go into captivity, and thou shalt come to Babylon, and there thou shalt die, and wilt be buried there, thou and all thy friends, to whom thou hast prophesied lies. With so many people opposing him or laughing at him, it was sometimes hard for Jeremiah to keep on with his work. I am in duration daily, he murmured. Everyone mocks me. More than once he thought of giving up, and I will not make mention of him or speak any more in his name, he said. But he couldn't do that. The word of God was like a burning fire in his bones, and he couldn't keep quiet. Thinking that if he wrote out all the message of God he had, and then it has a picture of him and a scribe, or a person that writes his story. This is the illustration. Okay. Thinking that if he wrote out all the message God had given him, the people might take notice of them. He dictated them to Barak, who wrote them on a scroll. Then he told Barak to go and read the scroll in the temple. Some of the prince became interested and asked Barak to read it privately to them. But when King Jehoiakim heard about the scroll, he sent for it, cut it with his penknife, and threw the pieces in the fire. After Zedekiah had Zedekiah had come to the throne, Jeremiah was accused of treason. He was caught leaving the city to go to the land of Benjamin, and the guard thought he was going to join the Babylonians. "It is false," said Jeremiah, but they wouldn't listen to him. He was beaten and put in prison. When King Zedekiah heard that what had happened, he sent for Jeremiah and asked him if there was any new word from God. "Yes," said the prophet, "there was. Thou shalt be delivered unto the hand of the king of Babylonia. For this he has sent back. For this he was sent back to prison. But even so, he kept on bearing his message. This city shall surely be given unto the hand of the king of Babylonia." Finally, the prince could stand it no longer. They went to Zedekiah and said, "We beseech thee, let this man be put to death, for thus he weaketh the hand of the men of war that remain in the city," speaking such words unto them. Zedekiah said they could do what they liked with him. So they cast him into the dungeon, which was in the court of the prison. It must have been very deep, for they needed ropes to let him down. At the bottom it was wet and muddy, and Jeremiah sank in the mire. It was a terrible place for anybody to be in prison, let alone a man as old as Jeremiah must have been by now. Now, how cold it was, so tiring that no place to sit or lie down. How uncomfortable, with his feet squishing in the mud all the time. Every time he must have seen an hour, and every hour an eternity. Every minute must seem like an hour, and every hour an eternity. And then, of course, it has two pictures. The top one right here is the scribe reading the message to everybody. And down at the bottom is Jeremiah in the pit on the squishy ground. Okay. Then we have a painting by Herbert Rudin of very interesting painting. There it is. And the caption says, "Jeremiah blessed the kind Ethiopian who pulled him out of the muddy dungeon where Zedekiah had thrown him for daring to tell him he would be overcome by Babylonians." Babylon. So he's so happy with the Ethiopian. All right, let's get back to the story. Only one person in Jerusalem cared, and that was Ebed-Melech. 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 He was not an Israeli, but an Ethiopian, a servant of the king's court. He liked the old prophet and knew what a good man he was. Bravely going to the king, he told him what a wrong thing had been done to Jeremiah. He is like to die of hunger where he is, he said. Then he asked for permission to take the old man out of the awful pit. Zedekiah agreed and told Ebed-Melech to take 30 men and help him. How glad Jeremiah must have been to see a kind face of a dear colored man, that's what he says, looking down from the top of a dungeon. 55. Those terrible years for certain people. But this was just a different time and everything. Okay, let me get back to the story. Sorry if I offended anybody. I can almost hear him say, God bless you, son, for coming to my rescue. Down came the rope. As Jeremiah reached for it, he found there was a bundle of old rags and cloth patches tied to it. Pull up the rags and the patches under your arms, called Ebed-Melech, so that the rope won't hurt you. How very thoughtful of him. Jeremiah did so, and the men began to pull. At last he reached the top, muddy, starving, and shivering with cold, but oh so glad to be out in the sunlight again. What happened to Ebed-Melech we are not told, but I am sure God must have blessed him for his kindness. As for Jeremiah, he was kept in the court of prison, and stayed there until the day that Jerusalem was taken. And of course, that was the end of story 10. So, what does that mean? Break time. So, we're going to break before I read this next story. See you in a bit.